The hallway smelled like antiseptic and expensive perfume. Not the sharp, clean kind you find in public hospitals. This was soft, curated cleanliness, the kind meant to reassure the wealthy that nothing bad could happen here. White walls, warm lighting, framed prints of abstract blossoms, a discreet sign that read, Harley Street Fertility Suites in letters so thin they looked like they were afraid of being seen. Evelyn Hart stood beneath that sign, her palms damp inside her coat pockets. Her wedding ring felt heavier than it should. Not because it had changed, but because she had. A nurse had just finished explaining the next steps, timelines, appointments, optimizing outcomes. The nurse's voice was gentle, almost kind. Evelyn nodded at the right moments, like a woman listening. But her mind kept returning to one sound, click, the click of a pill bottle. It had been a small thing at first, a detail easy to dismiss. Yet lately it seemed to follow her everywhere, like a metronome marking out the distance between hope and humiliation. Behind the frosted glass doors at the end of the corridor, Julian Cross was speaking to someone. Evelyn could hear his voice, not the words, not yet, just the calm tone he used when he wanted the world to believe he was in control. Then the door opened. Julian stepped out first, perfectly tailored in charcoal wool, his tie knot centered like a promise. Beside him was Sienna Vale, glossy hair, pearl earrings, and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Evelyn's breath caught so hard it felt like pain. She shouldn't have been here. Not like this. Julian's gaze found Evelyn, flickered, then settled into a polite irritation, as if she were a minor inconvenience on an already complicated day. Sienna's eyes moved over Evelyn like she was reading a label. And then Julian leaned slightly towards Sienna, just enough to hide his mouth from anyone watching. But Evelyn was watching. Evelyn had planned this. The feint, the fall, the little performance of weakness. She had told herself it was pathetic, that she was turning into the kind of woman she used to pity. But now, standing there, something in her body decided for her. Her knees softened. Her shoulders sagged. Her head tipped back as if the ceiling had suddenly become too bright. Evelyn heard a nurse gasp. She heard heels scrape on polished floor. She felt Julian's hands catch her, strong hands, familiar hands, hands that had once held her gently and now held her like a liability. The world tilted. Her hair brushed her cheek. Her eyelids fluttered. She let them fall almost closed. Not fully. Never fully. She left herself a slit of vision, a crack in the world. Julian's face hovered above her, composed, impatient. "Evelyn?" he said, loud enough for the nurse. "Breathe." His voice had the practiced concern of a man who knew how to perform devotion. Evelyn let her body go limp. Let the nurse rush closer. Let Julian lift her just enough so it looked real. And then he lowered his head. His mouth came near her ear. His breath smelled like mint and something darker, the bitterness of annoyance. And in a voice meant for only one person, Sienna, Julian said softly, almost tenderly, "Good. The pills were swapped. She'll never carry a child." But for a second, Evelyn forgot to breathe for real. Inside her chest, her heart did something strange, like it was trying to flee her body. Sienna's laugh was barely a sound, more a whisper of satisfaction. "Are you sure?" Sienna murmured. Julian's answer was the kind of certainty that makes the world tilt in a different direction. "As sure as I am that she'll blame herself. She always does. Always." Evelyn's eyes stung, not from tears, not yet, but from shock so cold it burned. The hallway lights blurred. The antiseptic smell became nauseating. The framed blossoms on the wall looked like bruises. Julian straightened, addressing the nurse again, voice warmer. "She's been under stress," he said. "Let's get her some water." Stress. Like stress could steal motherhood. Like stress could explain betrayal. Evelyn let her eyelashes tremble, let her lips part as if waking. Let the nurse fuss and Julian perform, because she understood something in that instant. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't fate. This was a plan. And the man holding her, the man whose last name she had taken, the man who had once pressed his palm to her belly and whispered, "One day." He had decided her body was a problem to be solved, a thing to be controlled, a door to be locked from the outside. Evelyn forced a small, weak sound. Julian's expression softened for the nurse's benefit, but his eyes stayed flat, unmoved, as if the woman in his arms wasn't his wife, but a chapter he couldn't wait to close. Evelyn swallowed, kept her breathing shallow, kept her face slack. Because if she moved too fast, if she showed what she'd heard, they would change the story. They would call her unstable. They would call her dramatic. They would make her doubt the truth until the truth dissolved. So she stayed still, suspended between the floor and Julian's hands, and she listened. Sienna leaned closer. "When do we tell Margaret?" Julian's jaw tightened, just for a moment. "She already knows enough." Evelyn felt a new kind of cold settle into her bones. Margaret, his mother, the woman who had looked at Evelyn's empty womb like a failed investment. Julian spoke again, low. "Just be patient. Once the divorce is finalized, the board will stop asking questions. They'll get the picture. We'll have a new narrative." Sienna's breathy satisfaction returned. "And Evelyn?" Julian's answer was soft, simple, final. "She'll be gone, with nothing." Evelyn's fingers curled inside her sleeve, not into a fist, not yet. Just a small curl, like a seed trying to become something. Because in that moment, Evelyn realized something else. The story didn't begin here. Not in this pristine hallway, not with her staged collapse. It began long before, back when she still believed love was protection. To understand how Julian Cross came to whisper that sentence into the air like a death spell, we have to go back, way back. To the first time Evelyn heard the click of a pill bottle and thought it meant hope. London looked different when you were in love. Even the brutal, wind-swept corners near the Thames felt romantic if someone's hand was in yours. Even the gray sky could feel like intimacy. Evelyn met Julian Cross at a charity gala where everyone pretended to care about the cause and actually cared about who noticed them caring. She wasn't meant to be there. Evelyn was there because her father had donated money to the foundation, and she had agreed, against her instincts, to represent him for the evening. He was ill that winter. Not dying, not yet, but tired in a way he hadn't been before. "You'll be fine," he had said, smoothing her hair like she was still a child. "Just smile, listen, and leave early." Evelyn had smiled and promised she would. But then Julian Cross approached her near the silent auction table, tall, composed, with an easy confidence that made other men look like they were trying too hard. He wasn't flashy. He didn't brag. He didn't push. He asked her questions and waited for answers. And when she spoke, he listened. In that room full of people who treated conversation like a currency, Julian's attention felt like a gift. Later, when he asked for her number, Evelyn surprised herself by saying yes. Their relationship grew in the gaps between his meetings and her father's medical appointments. Coffee dates on quiet side streets. Walks along the river, where the water carried the city's lights like spilled coins. Julian would talk about building something lasting, about legacy, about responsibility. Evelyn thought that meant he was the kind of man who understood the weight of love. When he proposed, it was in their apartment, not in public. No cameras, no staged spectacle. Just Julian on one knee, looking up at her with eyes that seemed sincere. "I don't want anyone else," he said. "I want a life that's ours." Evelyn said yes with a kind of certainty that feels foolish only in hindsight. The wedding was elegant and cold. Julian's mother, Margaret Cross, kissed Evelyn's cheek like she was greeting a distant acquaintance. "I hope you understand what it means to be part of this family," Margaret said softly, her smile sharp. We value strength." Evelyn had laughed politely, thinking it was just a warning about wealth. She didn't realize it was a warning about everything. They moved into a penthouse near Canary Wharf. Glass walls, pale wood floors, the city's heartbeat pulsing below them. At night, the lights from the towers made it feel like they lived inside a jewel box. Sometimes Evelyn would stand by the window with her tea and watch Julian work at the kitchen island, his laptop open, his sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked like a man building an empire. And Evelyn, she wanted to build a family. When she first mentioned children, Julian smiled. "Of course," he said. "One day. Not yet, but soon." Soon was a word that could stretch forever. At first, Evelyn didn't mind waiting. Their life was busy. Julian traveled. Evelyn worked part-time in arts administration, more passion than paycheck. But time has a way of making promises heavier. When Evelyn's father died, quietly in spring, Julian held her through the funeral and told her she wasn't alone. Margaret Cross watched Evelyn at the wake like she was measuring something. Later that night, Margaret pulled Julian aside, and Evelyn, standing near the staircase, heard the faint edge of their voices. "She's alone now," Margaret said. "No distractions. It's time." "It's not that simple," Julian murmured. Margaret's reply was ice disguised as concern. "It's exactly that simple. The board is asking questions. Investors prefer stability. A cross-heir is stability." Evelyn's stomach tightened. A cross-heir, not a baby, not a child, a symbol. Still, Evelyn told herself it didn't matter how they framed it. A child would be theirs. A family would be real. She didn't know she was already being turned into a function. Julian agreed to start trying soon after that. Soon became a calendar full of ovulation apps and polite disappointment. Month after month, Evelyn's hope would rise, then collapse. Julian would kiss her forehead and say, "Next time." But his eyes would already be elsewhere. Evelyn tried to keep it light. She laughed at her own anxiety. She bought little socks once, early on, then hid them and felt embarrassed. She told herself she was overthinking. Until the doctor's visit. Until the first series of tests. Until the moment a specialist said carefully, "Your hormone levels are a little off." A little off, not terrible, not hopeless, but enough to hang blame on her like a label. Julian took her hand in the exam room and squeezed as if he was supportive, but on the ride home he was silent. At home he opened a bottle of wine. Evelyn watched him pour 2 glasses, then drink his in 3 swallows. "You're quiet," she said gently. Julian's jaw worked. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About solutions." Solutions, like she was a problem. The next day, Julian booked them at the most expensive fertility clinic in London, Harley Street. The same clinic where months later, Evelyn would fake a faint and hear her life shatter. But back then, the clinic felt like hope. A receptionist offered warm smiles. A nurse handed Evelyn a folder with her name embossed in gold. And the doctor, Dr. Noah Sterling, looked at Evelyn with something rare. Honest concern. "We'll approach this carefully," Noah said. "No rushing, no panic, and no blame. Fertility is complex." Evelyn almost cried right there, from relief. Julian smiled politely and asked about success rates. Numbers. Outcomes. Noah prescribed a regimen. Nothing dramatic, just standard support and monitoring. A series of pills in a simple bottle with a white cap. Evelyn held that bottle like it was sacred. That night, in the penthouse kitchen, she twisted the cap. Click. The sound made her smile. Julian watched her take the pill with a sip of water. He wrapped an arm around her waist. "We'll get through it," he said. Evelyn leaned into him, trusting the warmth. She didn't notice his gaze linger on the bottle a second too long. She didn't hear the faint buzz of his phone moments later. She didn't know that somewhere across the city, Sienna Vale was reading his message and smiling into the dark. At first, the regimen made Evelyn feel like she was doing something. Action feels like control, even when it isn't. She started waking earlier, drinking herbal tea, avoiding caffeine, counting days like they were currency. Julian praised her discipline in public. At dinners with friends, he would squeeze her hand and say, "Evelyn's been so brave." People would coo. People would nod. People would tell Evelyn she was strong. Evelyn smiled, grateful. But at home, the air was different. Julian started coming home later. When Evelyn asked, he said, "Work is complicated." When she offered to help, organize something, lighten the load, he laughed softly. "You don't understand this world," he said. Not cruelly, almost affectionately. Just rest. Rest. Like her purpose was to wait. Margaret Cross began inviting Evelyn to lunches where everything was white, the tablecloth, the plates, the flowers. At one of those lunches, Margaret sipped her tea and asked casually, "Have you considered that perhaps motherhood simply isn't your calling?" Evelyn blinked. What? Margaret smiled. "Some women are meant to nurture in other ways." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her fork. Julian's sister, cold, practical, said later, "Mum means well. She just wants what's best for the family." For the family, not for Evelyn. Evelyn tried not to let it seep into her skin. But shame has a way of spreading. Every time a pregnancy test was negative, Evelyn blamed herself. Every time Julian sighed, she apologized. "I'm sorry," she would whisper, as if her body owed him. Julian would stroke her hair and say, "It's not your fault." But he didn't sound like he believed it. Sometimes, late at night, Evelyn would wake and find Julian staring at the ceiling, his phone glowing in his hand. "What are you doing?" she'd ask sleepily. Julian would flip the phone face down. "Just checking emails." Evelyn wanted to believe him, because the alternative, that the man she loved was leaking his life into someone else's hands, was unbearable. Doctor. Noah Sterling continued monitoring Evelyn's progress. Blood tests, gentle questions, adjustments. "No panic," he reminded her. "Bodies take time." Evelyn clung to those words. Julian, meanwhile, grew impatient. "Why isn't it working?" he asked one evening, his voice tight. "It will," Evelyn said softly. "Noah says—" "Noah," Julian repeated, like the name tasted unpleasant. "Your doctor is cautious. Caution doesn't build legacies." Evelyn stared at him. "Legacies?" Julian's face smoothed. He kissed her forehead, as if to erase what he'd said. "Forget it," he murmured. "I'm tired." Tired. Another word that could hide anything. The small humiliations continued. At a cross-family dinner, Margaret announced, "We've been looking at schools in Surrey, just in case." Evelyn almost smiled, until Margaret added, "Of course, that depends on whether you can provide." Provide. Like Evelyn was an employee being evaluated. Julian didn't correct his mother. He didn't take Evelyn's hand. He just sipped his wine and looked away. Later that night, Evelyn confronted him. "You let her speak to me like that." Julian loosened his tie, his expression weary. "She's from a different generation." "So am I supposed to accept being humiliated because she's old?" Julian sighed. "Evelyn, don't make everything a fight." Everything a fight. The phrase landed like a slap. Evelyn stared at him, stunned by how quickly he could turn her pain into her flaw. "I'm not making a fight," she said carefully. "I'm asking for support." Julian looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment she saw something in his eyes that wasn't love. It was calculation. Then it vanished. He moved closer, cupped her cheek. "I do support you," he said. "I'm the only one who does. The only one." Isolation wrapped itself around Evelyn like a silk scarf. Beautiful, suffocating. After that, Evelyn stopped telling her friends the truth. She stopped answering her cousin's calls. She stopped going out. She started living inside Julian's moods, and then the pills started to feel wrong. It wasn't dramatic, not a sudden illness, just small shifts. The nausea that had been mild became constant. Her skin broke out like she was 15 again. Her cycles grew erratic. When she mentioned it, Julian shrugged. Your body's reacting. It's normal. But Evelyn noticed something else. The bottle cap, the click, sounded different sometimes. Not always, just enough to make her pause. She told herself it was nothing. Plastic caps vary. Her hands were tired. Her mind was anxious. Still, one night, she held the bottle under the kitchen light and thought the tablets looked slightly different. She didn't know what she was looking for. She didn't know what she expected. But something in her chest tightened. Julian walked in behind her, kissed her neck, and said, "Stop worrying. You'll make yourself sick." Evelyn turned, startled. "How long have you been standing there?" Julian smiled. "Long enough to know you're spiraling again." Spiraling. Another label. Evelyn set the bottle down and forced herself to laugh. "I'm not spiraling, I'm just tired." Julian's eyes softened. "Then let me handle it." Handle it. Evelyn wanted to believe that meant care. She didn't yet understand that sometimes when someone offers to handle things, they mean they want you not to touch the truth. Days later, at another clinic appointment, Dr. Noah frowned at Evelyn's results. "These numbers don't match how you're describing your regimen," he said gently. Evelyn's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you've been taking what I prescribed, we should see different patterns." Julian spoke up quickly. "Are you implying she's not following instructions?" Noah held Julian's gaze. "I'm implying we should double-check everything." Julian's smile was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "Evelyn's very disciplined. She takes the pills every day." Evelyn nodded automatically. "Every day." Click. The sound echoed in her mind. Noah asked, "Do you have the bottle with you?" Evelyn hesitated. Julian's hand pressed lightly at her back, almost supportive, almost a nudge. "We can bring it next time," Julian said smoothly. Noah's eyes lingered on Evelyn. "Please do." On the ride home, Julian's fingers drummed on the steering wheel. "Why did he ask for the bottle?" Evelyn asked. Julian's jaw tightened. "Doctors like to cover themselves." "Cover themselves from what?" Julian glanced at her. "From liability. Don't start. Don't start." Evelyn stared out the window at the city rushing past, gray buildings, flashing advertisements, strangers walking with purpose. Inside her, a quiet thought grew. What if I'm not the problem? It was a small thought. Fragile. But once a thought exists, it can't be unthought. That night, when Julian went to shower, Evelyn stood at the kitchen counter with the pill bottle. She turned it in her hands. White plastic, pharmacy label, her name. Everything looked correct. And yet, she unscrewed the cap. Click. Evelyn closed her eyes. Something about that sound felt like a lie, a ridiculous thing to suspect, a sound. But sometimes instinct speaks through the smallest details when your mind has been trained to distrust itself. She opened her eyes and did something she had never done before. She didn't swallow the pill. She slipped it into her pocket. And when Julian returned, damp-haired and relaxed, she smiled and lifted her water glass. Julian watched her. Evelyn pretended to take the pill. Julian's shoulders loosened. He kissed her forehead. "Good girl," he murmured, like she was a pet. Evelyn's stomach turned. When he left the room, Evelyn took out the pill and stared at it in her palm. Small, innocent-looking. A tiny white thing that might be stealing her future. She placed it in a little jewelry box she never used anymore. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, and whispered into the empty room,
What are you doing to me?
The silence didn't answer, but the city outside kept humming, and somewhere, in that hum, Evelyn began to plan. Evelyn didn't become a detective overnight. She became something else first, a woman who stops asking permission to know the truth. She started small. She searched through drawers when Julian wasn't home. Not like a thief, like a wife trying to find her own life. She checked the cabinets in the bathroom where Julian kept his vitamins. She looked behind the expensive colognes. She searched for anything that didn't belong. Nothing. Julian was careful. So Evelyn became careful too. She texted Dr. Noah Sterling from a number Julian didn't know she had, an old SIM she'd kept from university. Evelyn, something feels wrong. Can we talk privately? Noah responded within minutes. Noah, yes, come in tomorrow at 8 o'clock, alone if possible. Evelyn read the message twice, her pulse pounding. Alone. How? Julian insisted on accompanying her to everything. Still, Evelyn told Julian she wanted to go early to ask the nurse about scheduling. Julian frowned. Why alone? Evelyn forced a laugh. Because I'm an adult, Julian. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance. Then he smoothed his expression. Fine, he said, but don't let them fill your head with nonsense. Nonsense. Evelyn smiled tightly. The next morning, she arrived at Harley Street before the sun fully rose. The waiting room was quiet. A fountain trickled softly, like fake calm. Noah led her into his office and closed the door. He didn't sit behind the desk. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, like a person rather than a professional. No judgment, he said. Tell me what you're feeling. Evelyn swallowed. I think something's wrong with the medication. Noah's face didn't change into disbelief, which made Evelyn want to cry. I noticed differences, she continued, voice shaky. The pills looked slightly different. The side effects don't match what you described, and my results don't make sense. Noah nodded slowly. Do you have any unused pills? Evelyn hesitated, then reached into her bag and handed him the small jewelry box. Inside were several tablets, ones she'd hidden rather than swallowed. Noah opened the box, examined them, then looked at Evelyn. You did the right thing, he said quietly. What does that mean? Evelyn asked, fear clawing up her throat. It means we can test them, privately, without going through the clinic's standard chain, which could alert someone. Alert someone. Evelyn felt cold. So you think... Noah held up a hand. I'm not saying anything yet, but your instincts are worth listening to. Evelyn's eyes stung. Julian keeps telling me I'm overreacting. Noah's gaze softened. People who benefit from your silence often call your questions overreactions. The words landed inside Evelyn like a match. She left the office with her heart pounding and her mind sharp. If the pills were wrong, someone had swapped them. And if someone had swapped them, it wasn't random, it was personal. That afternoon, Evelyn did something she hadn't done in months. She met a friend for coffee. Not a cross friend, not someone Julian approved of. Her friend Maya worked in communications for a legal firm, and she still had the kind of blunt honesty Evelyn desperately needed. Maya listened as Evelyn spoke in fragments. Fertility, pressure, side effects, suspicion. Maya's eyes narrowed. Do you think he's cheating? Evelyn flinched. I don't know. Maya leaned closer. Eve, if you suspect him, you need proof, not just for your heart, for your safety. Safety. Evelyn hadn't even framed it that way. Maya continued, Do you have a lawyer? Evelyn shook her head. Julian doesn't get to decide, Maya cut in. I can put you in touch with someone. Claire Whitmore. She's sharp. She won't let them bulldoze you. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm not ready for... divorce. Maya's voice softened. Then don't call it divorce. Call it protecting yourself. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the penthouse living room as Julian attended a late meeting. The city lights glittered outside, beautiful and indifferent. Evelyn held her phone and stared at Maya's message. Claire Whitmore. Family law plus high-asset litigation, high-asset. Julian's world. Evelyn's prison. She didn't call. Not yet. Instead, she opened the kitchen drawer where Julian kept spare keys and receipts, and she found something she hadn't noticed before. A small pharmacy bag. No logo, no receipt. Just a bag, crumpled like it had been shoved away quickly. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a second pill bottle. No label, no name. White cap. Evelyn twisted it open. Click. Her stomach dropped. She poured the tablets into her palm. They looked almost identical to hers. Same size, same shade of white, but not quite. A tiny marking on one she hadn't seen on her own pills. She sat frozen, the tablets resting on her skin like tiny stones. The sound of the front door unlocking jolted her. Julian. Evelyn's heart slammed. She swept the pills back into the bottle, shoved it into the bag, and slid it into her coat pocket just as Julian walked in. He looked surprised to see her awake. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, loosening his tie. Evelyn forced a smile. "Just waiting for you." Julian stepped closer, kissed her cheek. His cologne was crisp and expensive, but beneath it was that faint, unfamiliar perfume. Sienna's perfume. Evelyn's breath tightened. Julian didn't notice. Or he did, and he didn't care. He glanced toward the kitchen counter where her prescribed pill bottle sat. "You took your medication?" he asked casually. Evelyn nodded. "Of course." Julian's smile was immediate, satisfied. "Good," he said. "We'll get there." "Get where?" Evelyn watched him walk toward the bathroom, and in that moment, she understood the shape of the trap she needed to set. Julian was controlling the narrative. He was controlling her body. So she needed to control what he thought she knew. The next day, Evelyn scheduled another appointment at Harley Street. This time, she made sure Julian would come. She did it with practiced helplessness. "I feel faint sometimes," she told him. "I don't want to go alone." Julian's eyes softened with the kind of affection that felt rehearsed. "Of course I'll come." Evelyn nodded, grateful on the surface. Inside, she was building a stage. The day of the appointment, she dressed carefully. Soft sweater, simple makeup, hair pinned back. She wanted to look like the version of herself Julian expected. Delicate, obedient, desperate. In her bag, hidden in an inner pocket, was a small voice recorder Maya had given her. "Just in case," Maya had said. Evelyn hated how that sounded, just in case, like love could become evidence. In the clinic waiting room, Julian sat beside her, scrolling through his phone, one leg crossed over the other. Evelyn watched him from the corner of her eye. He didn't look like a villain. He looked like a man who could ruin you without raising his voice. Sienna arrived 10 minutes later. Not pretending, not hiding. She walked into the waiting room like she belonged there. Julian looked up and smiled, a real smile, the kind Evelyn hadn't seen in months. Evelyn's stomach twisted. Julian stood quickly. "What are you doing here?" Sienna's voice was soft. "You told me to come." Evelyn stared at them. Julian's eyes flickered to Evelyn, then back to Sienna, irritation flashing. "Not now," he murmured. Sienna's smile didn't falter. "It's fine. She'll be distracted." Evelyn felt something cold settle behind her ribs. Distracted. Like she wasn't even a person in the room. Just a problem to be managed. Julian glanced toward Evelyn and forced a smile. "Eva, I need to take a quick call." Evelyn nodded, swallowing hard. Julian walked toward the hallway. Sienna followed him. Evelyn's hands trembled. Now. She stood too quickly, swayed slightly, and took a step as if to follow, then stopped. Instead, she pressed a hand to her forehead. A nurse noticed. "Are you all right?" Evelyn forced a weak smile. Yes, just dizzy." The nurse gestured toward a chair. Evelyn sat and breathed shallowly. She reached into her bag, turned on the recorder without looking. Then she rose again and walked slowly toward the hallway, staying out of direct sight. She could hear Julian and Sienna just beyond the frosted glass. She leaned closer, heart pounding. That's when Julian opened the door, and that's when Evelyn let herself collapse. The staged faint, the perfect performance, and the whispered sentence that shattered her. Good. The pills were swapped. She'll never carry a child. Evelyn listened, broken open from the inside. But this time, she wasn't only hearing betrayal, she was collecting it. Because the recorder in her bag was capturing the truth, every cruel syllable. Evelyn lay limp while the nurse fussed and Julian pretended. But inside her, the seed that had curled in her fingers earlier began to unfurl. Not into rage, into clarity. By the time Julian helped her into a private room and offered her water, Evelyn knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't just fighting for a baby. She was fighting for herself. And she would not lose again. Evelyn waited 3 days before she confronted the truth. Not because she was weak, because she needed to become precise. Grief makes people sloppy. Anger makes people obvious. Evelyn needed to be neither. She went back to Harley Street alone and sat in Noah Sterling's office, her hands folded in her lap like a well-behaved student. Noah listened as she told him, quietly, clearly, what she'd overheard. Noah didn't interrupt. When she finished, the room felt heavier, as if the air itself was stunned. Noah exhaled slowly. The private test results came back. Evelyn's throat tightened. "And?" Noah's expression was careful. "The pills you brought me are not what I prescribed." Evelyn's vision blurred. "So I'm not—" "You're not failing," Noah said firmly. "You've been sabotaged." Sabotaged. A word that belonged to war, not marriage. Evelyn swallowed. "What were they?" Noah's jaw tightened. "I won't go into specifics, but they were designed to interfere with what we were trying to do, enough to prevent conception or implantation." Evelyn gripped the arms of the chair. "Someone did this on purpose," she whispered. Noah nodded. "Yes." Evelyn closed her eyes. For a moment, she saw herself in the penthouse bathroom, staring at her own face and wondering why it wasn't working. She saw herself apologizing to Julian, crying into his shoulder. She saw Margaret's smile, and she realized something horrible. They hadn't just stolen time. They had stolen her trust in her own body. Noah leaned forward. "Evelyn, you need to protect yourself. Legally." Evelyn's voice was small. "They'll say I'm unstable." Noah's gaze was steady. "Then you'll need someone who doesn't flinch." Evelyn thought of Maya, of Claire Whitmore. That afternoon, Evelyn met Claire in a discreet office near Holborn. Claire was not warm in the way Evelyn expected lawyers to be. She was composed, sharp-eyed, and calm with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing the world is cruel and choosing to win anyway. Evelyn handed her the recorder. Claire listened in silence, jaw tightening slightly as Julian's voice filled the room. When the recording ended, Claire set the device down carefully like it was radioactive. "That," Claire said, "is not just infidelity. That is coercion, control, potential criminality depending on how it's framed and what else we can prove." Evelyn's stomach turned. "I don't want to—" Claire held up a hand. "You don't have to decide everything today, but you need to understand something. Julian Cross will not play fair." Evelyn's voice shook. "I know." Claire studied her. "Do you have access to financial documents, trusts, inheritance?" Evelyn blinked. "My father left me something, but Julian handles most of—" Claire's eyes narrowed. "That's a problem." Evelyn swallowed. I didn't want to care about money. Claire's voice softened just a fraction. Money is only ugly when people use it to trap you. In your case, money is leverage. Leverage. Evelyn left Claire's office with a list. Documents to gather, accounts to review, things Julian might hide. That night, Evelyn returned to the penthouse and went to the only place Julian never expected her to look. His study. Julian's study was a shrine to control. Clean desk, aligned pens, no clutter. Evelyn opened drawers carefully, wearing gloves Claire had given her. She found what she expected. Contracts, board meeting notes, printed emails. She also found what she didn't expect. A folder labeled Heart Trust, Confidential, her father's name. Evelyn's breath caught. She opened the folder. Inside were legal documents with language dense enough to make her eyes ache. But one phrase repeated. Beneficiary, Evelyn Hart. And another phrase buried deeper. Contingent interest in cross-group holdings. Evelyn's pulse thundered. Cross-group. Julian's empire. The company that paid for their penthouse, his suits, their carefully curated life. Why would her father's trust have anything to do with cross-group? Evelyn flipped through the pages, hands shaking, and slowly the shape of a second twist formed. Her father had not just left her money. He had left her a lever inside Julian's world. A portion of cross-group shares, held quietly through a trust structure, had been placed under Evelyn's name years ago, long before she married Julian. Perhaps her father had seen something Evelyn hadn't. Perhaps he had understood that love is not always enough protection. Evelyn sank into Julian's desk chair, the documents trembling in her hands. If this was true, if she had a real stake in cross-group, then Julian didn't just want a divorce to be rid of her. He wanted a divorce to control the narrative before anyone realized she mattered. Before the board realized she wasn't just a wife. She was a shareholder, a risk, a threat. Evelyn closed the folder and slid it back into place. Then she opened Julian's email on the computer, something she had never done before. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was a line she hadn't crossed, but Julian had crossed every line first. Evelyn entered the password, not because she knew it, but because she guessed. Julian had always used the same one. The screen loaded. Evelyn scrolled quickly, searching for a name. Sienna. There it was. Dozens of emails, threads, attached documents. Not romantic messages. Operational ones. Schedules. Meetings. Next steps. As if Sienna weren't a lover but a partner in strategy. Evelyn's stomach churned as she read. Then one message froze her blood. From Julian Cross. To Sienna Vale. Subject, after Evelyn. Once she signs, we reset the story. Margaret will handle the family optics. The board wants an heir, not a scandal. You'll be the new beginning. Evelyn will be the problem that couldn't deliver. Deliver. Again, the word. Evelyn sat back, shaking. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a campaign to erase her, to rewrite her as defective so they could replace her without guilt. Evelyn's phone buzzed. Julian. Evelyn stared at the screen. She answered, voice soft. Hi. Julian's tone was gentle. How are you feeling after the clinic incident? You scared everyone. Evelyn forced a small laugh. I'm fine. Just embarrassed. Julian sighed like a man burdened by her fragility. You need rest, Evelyn. Rest. Evelyn looked at the Heart Trust folder again. Looked at the words that made her something Julian hadn't planned for. I will, she said quietly. I promise. Julian's voice warmed. Good girl. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the phone. Julian, she said, letting vulnerability drip into her voice like honey. Do you still want a family with me? There was a pause, just a fraction too long. Then Julian replied, smooth as glass. More than anything. Evelyn swallowed the bile rising in her throat. "Then I'll keep trying," she whispered. Julian sounded relieved. "That's my Evelyn." When he hung up, Evelyn set the phone down and stared into the dark window. Her reflection looked like a stranger, but behind her eyes was something new, a decision. Julian Cross thought he could make her disappear. He thought he could steal her motherhood and call it destiny. He thought she would walk away ashamed and silent. He didn't know her father had left her a hidden weapon. He didn't know she had proof. And he didn't know that the woman he had trained to apologize was learning how to fight. Julian didn't wait for Evelyn to recover before he struck. A week after the clinic incident, he came home early, unusual enough to set Evelyn's nerves on edge. He found her in the kitchen, calmly chopping vegetables, as if her world hadn't cracked. Julian watched her for a moment, then said, "We need to talk." Evelyn set the knife down carefully. "Okay." Julian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He looked like a man preparing for a negotiation. "This isn't working," he said. Evelyn tilted her head. "What isn't?" He sighed. "Us. The fertility journey. The stress. Your episodes." Episodes. Evelyn's heartbeat remained steady, which surprised her. The moment she'd feared for months had arrived, and yet she felt strangely calm. Julian continued, voice soft with rehearsed compassion. "I think we should separate. For your well-being." Evelyn kept her face blank. "My well-being?" "Yes," Julian said. "You've been fragile, and I can't keep carrying everything." Carrying everything. The audacity was almost artistic. Evelyn swallowed and asked, "Is this because I can't have a baby?" Julian's expression shifted into something sympathetic. "Evelyn, I would never say that," but his eyes said it. His eyes said, "You failed me." Evelyn lowered her gaze like a defeated woman. "If you want to leave, just say it." Julian's relief flickered. "I don't want to hurt you." Evelyn forced a whisper. "It already hurts." Julian stepped closer, placed a hand on her shoulder. "We can do this amicably." Amicably. A word that meant, take less. Be quiet. Evelyn nodded slowly, playing her role. Inside her pocket, her phone was recording. Claire had taught her, always document the story they're trying to build. Julian said, "I'll have my lawyers draft something fair." Fair? Evelyn looked up with watery eyes. "Will Margaret be happy?" Julian's mouth tightened. This isn't about her. But they both knew it was. Evelyn asked softly, "Is there someone else?" Julian's eyes flashed. "Don't be ridiculous." Evelyn flinched as if chastised. "I'm sorry." Julian's shoulders loosened. He liked her apologizing. He liked being the reasonable one. He kissed her forehead, cold lips against warm skin. "I'll take care of you," he murmured, "even after." Evelyn watched him walk away, and the rage in her chest stayed quiet, coiled. Because she knew the next part would be a performance, bigger than any staged feint. Julian's lawyers moved fast. Within days, Evelyn received documents that painted her as emotionally unstable, prone to episodes, incapable of maintaining the demands of the cross-family lifestyle. They offered her a settlement that looked generous to outsiders, but included a confidentiality clause thick as a chain. Claire Whitmore read the papers and laughed once, sharply. "They're trying to buy your silence," she said. Evelyn's voice was calm. "Will it work?" Claire's eyes gleamed. "Not if you let me drive." Julian filed first. He made sure the narrative reached the right ears. Suddenly, Evelyn heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. "Poor Julian. He tried so hard." Evelyn just couldn't handle it. Margaret Cross hosted a dinner party and told people with a sorrowful sigh, "Evelyn needs peace. We all want what's best for her." As if Evelyn were a broken vase they were politely discarding. Sienna Vale began appearing more openly at cross-group events, always just on the edge of the camera frame. Evelyn watched the news coverage one evening and felt her stomach turn. Sienna was wearing Evelyn's favorite shade of blue, as if she was already stepping into Evelyn's life, one color at a time. Claire prepared the case like a chess match. She gathered Noah Sterling's testimony, carefully framed. She collected the private lab results, documented chain of custody. She preserved the recording from the clinic. She also contacted a forensic accountant. And she asked Evelyn for one more thing. "The trust documents," Claire said. "Everything you found." Evelyn handed over the Heart Trust folder. Claire's eyes widened as she read. "Oh," Claire murmured. "Oh, Evelyn." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What?" Claire looked up, a slow smile spreading like sunrise. "You're not just his wife." Evelyn's hands trembled. "What am I?" Claire leaned back. "You are the reason he's panicking." The first court hearing took place in a wood-paneled room where history seemed to press down from the walls. Julian arrived with a team of lawyers and a face carved from concern. Evelyn arrived with Claire, wearing a simple dark dress and her hair pinned back. She looked composed, not fragile, not broken. Julian's gaze hardened when he saw her. Margaret Cross sat behind Julian, her posture rigid, her expression offended by Evelyn's continued existence. Sienna sat a few rows back, eyes downcast like a saint. Evelyn almost laughed. Julian's lawyer spoke first, painting Evelyn as unstable, prone to fainting, obsessive, emotionally erratic. He referenced the clinic incident. Evelyn listened without reacting. Because she understood, this wasn't about truth. It was about story. Then Claire stood. Claire didn't begin with outrage. She began with calm. "My client has been portrayed as fragile," Claire said. "So let's discuss what truly happened." Julian's jaw tightened. Claire presented evidence slowly, methodically, like laying bricks. Noah Sterling testified first, careful and professional. He explained that the medication Evelyn had been taking was not what he prescribed. Julian's lawyer objected. Claire produced the lab results. The judge allowed them. Julian's expression flickered, just once, into alarm. Then Claire introduced the recording. Julian's lawyer tried to block it. Claire argued. The judge listened. And then the room heard Julian Cross's voice, soft and certain. "Good. The pills were swapped. She'll never carry a child." A hush fell so deep it felt like the building itself had stopped breathing. Evelyn didn't look at Julian. She looked at the judge, because she wanted the judge to see her not as a sobbing woman, but as someone with spine. Julian's face went pale. Margaret's lips parted slightly, then pressed into a tight line. Sienna's eyes widened, her mask slipping for the first time. Claire let the silence hang long enough to bruise. Then she spoke again. "This is not a misunderstanding," Claire said. "This is intentional sabotage designed to deprive my client of reproductive autonomy and to build a narrative of failure." Julian's lawyer scrambled, claiming the recording was taken out of context. Claire tilted her head. "Out of context? Then perhaps Mr. Cross can explain this context." Julian's mouth opened. And for the first time, Evelyn saw fear behind his eyes. Not fear of losing her. Fear of losing control. The judge adjourned the hearing with instructions for further investigation, but the damage was done. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Julian's team tried to shield him. Evelyn walked steadily beside Claire, her face calm. Questions flew like stones. "Mrs. Cross, did your husband sabotage your fertility treatment?" "Mr. Cross, did you swap your wife's medication?" Sienna disappeared into a car with her head bowed. Margaret's face was carved from rage. That night, Cross Group's board convened an emergency meeting. Not because they cared about Evelyn's pain. Because scandal is bad for stock prices. Evelyn sat at the end of a long boardroom table, the city lights behind her like a crown. Julian sat opposite her, face tight. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Cross, Evelyn, we've reviewed some preliminary information." Evelyn spoke calmly. "My name is Evelyn Hart." Julian's nostrils flared. Claire sat beside Evelyn, a stack of documents in front of her. Claire slid the Hart Trust papers across the table. "One more point," Claire said. "Evelyn Hart is a beneficiary of the Hart Trust, which holds a significant interest in cross-group holdings." Murmurs rippled through the board. Julian's head snapped up. "That's—" Claire cut him off. "It's documented. Legally." The chairman stares at the papers, then at Julian. Julian's voice tightened. "This is irrelevant. My personal life." The chairman's gaze was cold. "Your personal life is now a corporate liability." Evelyn watched Julian's composure crack, just slightly. The board members whispered to each other, eyes calculating. Evelyn realized something strange. These people had never cared about her as a person. But now that she was connected to money and control, now they saw her. Claire spoke again. "Given the seriousness of the allegations and the potential impact on the company, we request Mr. Cross step down temporarily pending investigation." Julian's chair scraped back. "Absolutely not." The chairman's voice hardened. "You don't have a choice." Julian's eyes shot to Evelyn. For the first time in a long time, he looked at her as if she were dangerous. Evelyn met his gaze and felt something settle inside her. Not triumph, not cruelty, just a quiet reclaiming. Julian had once whispered that she would be gone with nothing. Now he sat across from her, watching the ground shift beneath his feet. Sienna tried to salvage her position by releasing a statement, claiming she was manipulated, claiming she knew nothing. But Claire produced emails. Not romantic ones. Operational ones. The board saw them. The press saw them. Sienna's image of innocence shattered. Margaret, cornered, attempted to frame everything as family matters. But her influence couldn't stop the machine once it started. Julian's resignation was announced as temporary, but everyone understood what it meant. In private, Julian confronted Evelyn one last time. He came to the penthouse late, eyes bloodshot, face tight with fury. Evelyn was waiting in the living room, calm, a suitcase by the sofa. Julian's voice trembled. "You destroyed me!" Evelyn's expression didn't change. "You destroyed me first." Julian stepped closer, anger flickering. "You wouldn't have survived without me." Evelyn let out a soft, almost sad laugh. "That's what you needed me to believe," she said. Julian's jaw clenched. "I loved you." Evelyn's eyes stung, but her voice stayed steady. "No," she said. "You loved what I did for your story." Julian's face twisted. "I needed an heir. The board, my mother." Evelyn's voice sharpened. "So you stole my choice." Julian's eyes flickered away, and in that flicker, Evelyn saw it, the part of him that knew exactly what he'd done. He opened his mouth as if to speak. Then he said quietly, "You were never going to give me what I needed." Evelyn felt the last thread snap inside her. She stepped closer until they stood inches apart. Her voice was low, dangerous in its calm. "I am not a vessel," she said, "and I am not your casualty." Julian stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not fragile, not obedient, not apologizing. Evelyn turned away, picked up her suitcase, and walked toward the door. Julian's voice cracked behind her. "Where will you go?" Evelyn paused, hand on the handle. She thought of the pill bottle's click, the monitor's beep, the months of shame. Then she said, without looking back, "Somewhere I can breathe." And she left him standing in the glass box he had built, alone with his own lies echoing off the walls. Evelyn didn't heal in a montage. She didn't wake up one day radiant and free. Healing was quieter than that. It was waking in a small rented flat in Kensington where the air didn't smell like Julian's cologne. It was making tea without feeling watched. It was walking past baby strollers without collapsing. It was learning how to exist in her own body again, not as a battleground, but as home. Dr. Noah Sterling adjusted her treatment plan carefully, gently, reminding her that her body was not broken. "Your body has been through stress," he told her, "but stress doesn't define you." Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice yet. She attended therapy, something Julian would have mocked as weakness. In those sessions, she spoke about Margaret's cold comments, Julian's gentle cruelty, the way she had learned to doubt herself. Some days, she cried. Some days, she sat in silence, hands clenched, listening to her own breath. Slowly, she learned that strength wasn't the absence of pain. It was moving through pain without letting it name you. The legal process continued. Julian's team tried to smear her again, but evidence had weight. The court's decisions weren't dramatic the way movies are. No gavel slam moment of perfect justice. But there were consequences. There were findings. There were settlements that didn't require silence. And there was one victory Evelyn hadn't expected. She stopped needing Julian to admit he was wrong, because she knew. And knowing was enough. Cross Group's board distanced itself from Julian permanently. He didn't go to prison. Life rarely offers such neat punishment. But he lost the thing he worshipped most, his control. Sienna tried to reinvent herself, tried to become a sympathetic figure, but the emails and evidence followed her like a shadow. Margaret retreated into private fury, her social circle shrinking as whispers replaced respect. Evelyn watched it all from a distance, not with joy, with a quiet sense of inevitability. When people build their lives on harm, collapse is not a surprise. It's a delayed bill. One evening, months later, Evelyn sat on her small balcony, the city lights softer from this angle. She held a new pill bottle in her hand, this one prescribed openly, delivered directly, monitored carefully. She twisted the cap. Click. The sound made her inhale sharply. A flash of the clinic hallway returned. Julian's whisper. Sienna's laughter. The cold. Evelyn's fingers trembled. Then she did something different. She set the bottle down. She placed her palm flat against her own stomach, not with desperation, not with apology, with tenderness, with ownership. She whispered, "I'm here." Not to a future baby, to herself. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn used part of her trust funds to start something small, then larger. A foundation. Not a glossy charity gala like the ones where she'd met Julian. Something practical. Legal support and medical advocacy for women navigating coercion, reproductive control, and high-conflict separations. Claire Whitmore helped her structure it. Maya helped her communicate it. Noah helped connect it with ethical medical networks. Evelyn didn't become a hero. She became a woman who refused to disappear. On the first day the foundation opened its phone lines, Evelyn listened to the calls. Quiet voices, trembling voices, women describing things that sounded like family issues until you heard the pattern underneath. Control, shame, isolation. Evelyn sat with the headset on, eyes closed, and felt something inside her loosen. Her pain wasn't unique. That didn't diminish it. It transformed it. Months later, Evelyn received an email from Julian. One line, no apology, no admission, just a sentence that sounded like someone trying to reclaim the last word. "I hope you're happy now." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed a reply. Not angry, not pleading, just clear. "I am learning to be." She didn't send it. She deleted it. Because Julian no longer deserved her words. Instead, she closed her laptop, stepped out into the London night, and walked toward a life that belonged to her. The city air was cold and clean. The Thames moved like a dark ribbon beneath the lights. Evelyn tucked her hands into her coat and listened to her own footsteps. Steady, real. No performance, no collapse, just motion forward. And somewhere behind her, in a memory she no longer lived inside, the old sounds faded. The fake calm of the clinic fountain, the sharp beep of the monitor, the cruel whisper in her ear. In their place was something quieter, something harder to destroy. A woman's breath, a woman's choice, a woman's voice. And if this story touched something in you, if you've ever been made to feel like your worth depended on what you could provide for someone else, leave a message. Not for the algorithm, for yourself, because you are not alone, and you do not have to vanish to keep someone else comfortable.